As a suspense screenwriter, I'd sell this as a tension-loaded chain reaction. A briefing room, a dangerous lie, a commander losing control, and 29 operators silently choosing a lieutenant over rank. Then the story gets even better because the same dog that senses deception helps uncover the real hostage site before the enemy can spring the trap. Every minute tightens the pressure until the mission becomes a race against betrayal itself.
Get her out of my briefing room. The command from Commander Brett Holloway crashed over the public radio, feeling like a physical strike. I do not care what is required. Get this individual out. Every soldier at Camp Lemonnier heard him. Every animal handler and every canine on the base understood the order. What Holloway did not know was that as he spoke, 29 German shepherds all lifted their heads. This was not from a handler's command, but from a bond one woman built over 3 years, a connection that rank could never create, and she was right outside his door. If this story has already grabbed your attention, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what happens next. Tell me in the comments what city you are watching from. I am curious to see how far this incredible story travels. To understand what Zara Cole was about to do, you have to see who she was from the start. The meeting was scheduled for 5:30 in the morning, and Lieutenant Zara Cole was seated before anyone else arrived. She was just 22 years old. Her dark hair was pulled into a neat bun, and she wore a simple olive shirt with camouflage pants, her usual attire for morning drills. She was not there to impress anyone. Her role was to analyze the mission, Operation Clean Sweep, and she had spent the last 72 hours poring over every report, satellite image, and contractor file for the plan. She knew the operation better than the man who designed it. Commander Brett Holloway entered the room at 5:32 exactly. He was in his middle 40s, with the smug air of a former football star who was still reliving his glory days. He dropped his folder on the lectern without looking at anyone, switched on the tactical display, and began his brief. Operation Clean Sweep goes live in 40 hours, he announced. Our objective is a confirmed site in the Eastern District, where 14 civilians are being held. Our intel confirms 32 hostiles in 2 separate structures. We will push through the northern corridor, secure the hostages, and be out in under 40 minutes. Zara examined the map, focusing on the northern path. Then she studied it again, this time with intense focus. She put her hand up, but Holloway kept talking. The main extraction route leads straight through the bar market. We will have a 3-vehicle team on standby and ready to... Commander. Her voice was steady, but it sliced through the room. I think there is a problem with that extraction route. Holloway paused his speech. He gave her a look of complete irritation, like he was bothered by a bug. Lieutenant Cole. Yes, sir. This is a mission briefing, not a town hall meeting. I am aware of that, sir, but the northern road cuts directly through the Bakar market. On a Tuesday morning at 7 o'clock, that market will have over 400 vendors and at least 1,200 shoppers. A 3-vehicle escape through that area will not help us stay hidden. It will turn us into a very large target. The room fell silent. Holloway held her with a long, cold stare. The intelligence report gave that route the green light. That report was finished on a Friday, sir. The information it contains was gathered on a Saturday. The BAR market is open from Tuesday to Saturday only. The number of people there on a Saturday is very different from a Tuesday. I have the current traffic analysis right here if you wish to review it. Toward the back of the room, a man adjusted his position. Senior Chief Darren Wyatt, the head of canine operations at Lemonnier for 4 years, looked up. He remained silent, but now he was listening with his full attention. With exaggerated slowness, Holloway set his laser pointer down. Where did you obtain this information? From the same contractor file your intelligence team used, sir. It is from a company named Meridian Analytics, on page 47. The notes in the analysis say clearly it was gathered on a Saturday. Holloway's jaw tightened. And you think a little note on page 47 is justification to question a fully authorized operational plan? I think a little note on page 47 shows that 1,400 civilians will be directly in our path when we need to be quick and quiet. That seems critically important to me, sir. The atmosphere in the room grew heavier. A younger soldier, Marcus Webb, 26 and fresh from his second tour, looked at the person next to him. He did not utter a sound, but his face said it all. Holloway squared his shoulders, making himself look taller. Lieutenant Cole, this mission has received approval from the very top. Your point is noted, but it will not alter our orders. We will carry out the plan just as I have presented it. Zara held his gaze. Sir, if we proceed with this and hit resistance in that market, we will not be able to separate civilians from the enemy. We will be giving them a huge advantage. They will blend into the crowd. That is a hypothetical risk, Lieutenant. It is a mathematical certainty, sir. The road becomes just 40 meters wide at one section. A firefight there with 1,400 civilians is not a risk. It is a guaranteed disaster. Holloway's voice dropped. It grew quiet with the fake calm that powerful men use right before they silence opposition. Lieutenant Cole, you are excused. Zara's expression did not change. Sir, I need you to exit this room immediately and wait for me outside. We will handle your conduct after this briefing is over. She met his eyes for 3 long seconds. Then she closed her binder, pushed her chair in, and got up. Every person in that room was watching her. 21 soldiers, 4 analysts, and 2 other officers observed as a 22-year-old lieutenant. The only one who did her job right was ordered to leave. She stepped into the hallway, and the door shut firmly behind her. She stood alone in the corridor, taking a slow, calming breath. She allowed the anger to rise within her, and then she let it go, a skill she had worked hard to master. It had taken her 2 years of intense training and a very tough deployment to learn how to process an emotion without showing it. 30 seconds later, Senior Chief Darren Wyatt stood next to her. He had emerged from a side door and walked over to her silently, with his arms folded. You read the whole Meridian report, did you not? Every single page, she confirmed. And the final section. Wyatt nodded slowly. He was a powerfully built man with a shaved head and a thin scar running from his eyebrow down his jaw. After 2 decades of service, he weighed his words carefully because he knew each one had power. You are not wrong, Cole. I know I am not. That is not what I mean. I mean that you are correct. He knows you are correct, and that is going to create a problem. She looked straight at him. For who? Wyatt avoided her question. He asked instead, Are you aware that Meridian Analytics has supplied the intelligence for every single major operation from this base for the past 14 months? That was news to her. She filed the information away. And do you know, he continued, that in those same 14 months, 3 different missions have failed completely, for reasons no one can explain. She went perfectly still. What are you trying to tell me, Senior Chief? He looked back at the briefing room door, then met her eyes again. I am telling you that you have just discovered a very significant loose thread, Lieutenant. And I am also telling you to be extremely careful about how you choose to pull on it. Then he turned around and went back into the room. Zara remained in the silent hallway for 4 minutes before everything blew up. A loud crackle came from the radio on the wall. It was the general broadcast channel, which went out to every operations hub, every handler station, and every security checkpoint at the camp. Commander Brett Holloway's voice came through, sharp and authoritative. All stations, this is Holloway. I require 2 security officers to report to the main briefing corridor at once. I have a junior officer who requires an escort off my base of operations. Take care of it. The words seemed to fill the air with their own weight. Zara heard them perfectly. She did not flinch, taking in the full force of the public humiliation. And in that very moment, something happened that Commander Holloway could have never predicted. It was a variable he had no way to calculate, because it was born from a loyalty his authority could never inspire. At the canine kennels 40 meters away, a German shepherd named Remy lifted his head. He had been napping beside his handler, a 24-year-old specialist named Diego Flores, who had been his partner for the last 18 months. Remy had received no command. His handler made no signal, but the dog got up, faced the hallway, and stared at the exact spot where Zara was standing. Flores glanced from his dog to the empty hall, and then back at his dog. "What is it you are sensing?" he murmured. From another canine post, 2 more shepherds rose to their feet. Then 3 more stood at the front gate. Every one of their handlers witnessed it. Wyatt came out the side door again, this time moving much faster. His expression was like granite. "You heard that broadcast?" he asked. "I heard it," Zara confirmed. "He sent that out over the public channel." "I am aware." Wyatt's voice was low and serious as he studied her. "Cole, in my 20 years of service, I have never, ever heard a commander speak about another officer that way on an open channel. Not once. What he did was not just an order to leave a room. He tried to make an officer look like a fool in public," Zara said quietly. "I understand the situation, Senior Chief. What is the play here?" She looked down the long hall. Flores stood there with Remy. The dog's eyes were locked on her, a calm and wise look in their golden depths, as if he knew the whole truth. "I am not going anywhere," she stated firmly. "I will not be pushed." Wyatt studied her, then gave a small nod. He switched his radio to the handler channel and issued a clear order. "All teams, move to this hallway." For the rest of his career, Commander Brett Holloway would never be able to explain the next 4 minutes. From every doorway, stairwell, and connecting hall, 29 operators appeared. They came from the East Barracks, the supply depot, and the secondary intel center. Every one of them had heard the open transmission. They all knew Zara Cole. They all shared a belief that some principles matter more than rank. One of those principles is that you support a subordinate when a superior officer unfairly shames them for speaking the truth. They formed up in the hallway right behind her. A complete silence descended. Nothing needed to be said. The presence of 29 operators delivered a powerful message on its own. At their feet, a row of German shepherds sat at attention, their focus on the door. They waited in a state of calm readiness. Holloway's voice came over the radio again. "Status from my security detail?" The only reply was silence. At the other end of the hall, the door swung open, and Commander Brett Holloway walked in, stopping abruptly at the scene before him. He was completely still. His eyes swept over the operators, and then the dogs. He finally settled his gaze on Zara Cole, who stood in the middle with a folder under her arm, her expression disturbingly peaceful. "What is going on here?" he demanded. Zara met his stare. "You asked for a reaction, sir. Here it is." Commander Brett Holloway was not easily shaken. He had spent 23 years in the service, training himself to be a rock when everything else crumbled. But in that hallway, facing 29 operators and their canines all staring at him with the same quiet, firm resolve, a feeling he had not known in years came over him. The floor beneath him felt like it was shifting. He recovered his composure almost instantly. Men of his kind always find an angle. He straightened his shoulders and jabbed a finger at Zara. "Lieutenant Cole, this assembly is not sanctioned. I am ordering everyone here to return to your duties immediately." Not one person moved. Not an operator, not a handler, and definitely not a dog. Holloway clenched his jaw. "I gave an order. Get back to your posts." Senior Chief Darren Wyatt stepped forward from the group. He walked with a steady, confident pace, the kind of self-possession that comes from a long career of proven courage. He stopped a few feet from Holloway, his expression unblinking. "Sir, with all due respect, you gave a humiliating command over an open frequency for the whole base to hear. Everyone here was listening. This is not some unauthorized assembly. This is the direct result of your actions." Holloway's voice became cold as ice. "Senior Chief Wyatt, you are on the verge of a decision that will end your career." "I have made tougher ones," Wyatt replied without emotion. From deep within the group behind Zara, someone let out a suppressed laugh. 3 rows deep stood Marcus Webb, the young operator from before, his arms crossed and his face calm. His eyes, though, were sharp and observant. Holloway shifted his focus back to Zara. "Is this what you consider loyalty? This entire unit protecting you?" "No, sir," she said. "I consider it accountability. Those are two very different things. You are a 22-year-old lieutenant who marched out of a classified briefing and created this entire mess. You ordered me to leave that briefing, sir, on a public channel, right after I identified a major safety problem with the northern exit route. That problem was reviewed and found to be irrelevant." "By who, sir?" "You brushed it aside in less than 4 seconds and did not even look at my report. That is a brush-off, not a review." Holloway stepped closer to her. He was a good 8 inches taller than she was, a physical advantage he often used for intimidation. "Lieutenant, this is your last chance to back down. Get yourself together and respect the chain of command." Zara did not move an inch. "And this is your only chance, sir, to explain to these 29 operators and their partners why Meridian Analytics has been the only intelligence source for this base for 14 months, and why 3 of their operations ended as classified failures." A heavy silence filled the hallway. It was the type of quiet that feels like everyone in the room has stopped breathing. Holloway's face shifted. It was a tiny change, impossible for a novice to see, but the 29 experts in observing human behavior saw it perfectly. The look in his eyes was different. It was not anger anymore, but something more like fear. Standing with Remy, Diego Flores was the first to see it. He glanced at Wyatt, who had seen it too. "Where did you learn that?" Holloway asked. His voice was entirely different. The authority was gone, replaced by a tight defensive tone. "From you, sir," Zara answered. "I brought up Meridian Analytics and 3 failed missions. You did not deny it. It was a masterful strategic play, one of the best any of them had ever seen." Webb made eye contact with the operator next to him, a silent agreement that they would always remember this. Holloway drew a fast, sharp breath. He threw his shoulders back. He had made his choice. "This conversation is finished. Lieutenant Cole is officially on administrative leave, pending an inquiry into her actions. Wyatt, I want you in my office in an hour. The rest of you are dismissed." He turned on his heel and walked back into the room. It was not a lounge. It was an office with a protected phone line that he used to call a number not listed in any official directory. The people in the hall did not know it, but Remy could tell something was off. The dog was bred to notice stress and chemical signals. When the door clicked shut, he turned his head to watch it, just like he would track a source of danger. Diego Flores noted his dog's movement, but kept quiet. Wyatt looked at Zara. "Administrative leave. I heard him. He's going to wrap this up in red tape before his bosses find out what he said." "Then we need to contact someone higher up right away," she replied. Wyatt's face showed both admiration and worry. "Cole, do you realize what you are asking for?" "I am asking you to make a phone call, Senior Chief." "No, I am asking if you understand what will happen after that call." She looked him directly in the eye. "I understand that 14 civilians are stuck in a building, and the rescue is set for 40 hours from now. I also understand that using the current northern route plan will get people killed for no reason. I understand that someone who has money invested in this mission wants the plan to go forward as is. And I understand that every person here heard Brett Holloway shame me on the radio, and not one of them walked away." She let that sink in. "So yes, Senior Chief, I know exactly what has to happen now." Wyatt thought about it for a moment. Then he took out his personal cell phone. It was not his military radio or his work phone, but his own. He found a contact and placed the call. Webb leaned toward the man beside him, an experienced operator named T.J. Garrett with 14 years and 4 tours. "Who is he calling?" Garrett answered without turning his head. "A person Holloway cannot touch." The call was short, just 45 seconds. Wyatt kept it simple. He gave a name and a date. He said the words "open broadcast," "Meridian Analytics," and "northern exit route." He was silent for 30 seconds, then said, "Understood, sir," and hung up. He faced Zara. "You have 2 hours." 2 hours to do what? Before a high-ranking official starts asking quiet questions. After that, It is going to get loud. She nodded. Then we will make every second count. During his tribunal, Holloway would call that time an unauthorized alternate mission planning session. What really happened was Zara Cole, 7 operators, 4 dog teams, and Senior Chief Wyatt gathered in the secondary intelligence hub to completely rework Operation Clean Sweep. Zara pulled up the mission plan from Meridian Analytics once more. She went straight to page 47, found a little note, and read it aloud. The note mentioned that the pedestrian traffic study was done on a Saturday, from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. It estimated that between 400 and 600 civilians would be nearby. Webb gestured to the map. But the mission is on a Tuesday, he said. Tuesday is the big market day in the Bakar sector. Sellers arrive at 5 in the morning. The place is busiest between 6:30 and 9 a.m. Zara's voice was firm. The number of civilians there during our op will not be 400 to 600. She flipped the page. The real number is going to be closer to 2,400. Garrett leaned in, his expression grim. That is not a minor mistake. That is a deliberate lie. Zara agreed. It is a lie someone at Meridian was hoping we would overlook. From the back, Flores posed the question. Whoever reads to page 47? He quickly supplied the answer. You do. Zara's quiet voice confirmed it. I do. She then directed everyone to the secondary site, a spot Holloway's plan completely missed. She had been wary of it, but had moved on. Now, she laid out the satellite pictures. Look at this structure, she urged, tapping the image. Meridian claimed it was an abandoned warehouse. Garrett nodded. It definitely looks that way. It only appears vacant on a weekend, she explained. These shadows to the east show a building missing from the blueprints. And there is more. She pointed to a minor detail in the corner. The ventilation was just upgraded. That system is installed for a building with people inside. The room became completely still. Webb spoke in a measured tone. So our target is not where we were informed. It is very likely they are not, she answered. They are probably in a building Meridian concealed. Flores stood up, his body rigid. If Holloway proceeds, he attacks nothing. Or worse, he is leading his team into a trap. The truth of her discovery was heavy. Wyatt spoke slowly. Cole, if this is correct, it is not just a poor plan. This mission was a setup. She looked him in the eye. I know. It was on purpose. It is sabotage, he declared. I know, she said again. Garrett leaned his head back, staring at the ceiling. We have 14 hostages to rescue in 40 hours, Zara reminded them softly. And the current plan will get our team killed. Webb looked over at Wyatt, Garrett, Flores, and Remy. He noted the other handlers along the walls, their dogs waiting quietly. He focused again on Zara. Okay, what do we do? Her gaze went right back to the map. She had already worked out a new plan in her head while Holloway was talking. It was ready before he finished, formed while the others were still processing the faulty information. She grabbed a marker and started outlining the new path. Roughly 6 minutes into her briefing, the door opened suddenly. It was not Holloway. A man in his 50s stood there in regular clothes, with no insignia, but his presence alone had authority. He stood in the doorway, observing the scene. His gaze shifted from the map to Zara Cole, who was instructing soldiers with a total of 29 years of service. Finally, he said, Go on. I want to hear this. Wyatt instantly stood at attention. Webb unconsciously straightened up. Garrett, with 14 years of service, gawked as surprise turned to understanding. Zara just met the man's eyes without flinching. She did not know who this person was. Within a minute, she would find out his name, and that name would change everything for the next 36 hours. For the moment, she held his gaze and stated plainly, Sir, the northern route is a fatal trap. The primary target is a decoy, and someone here knew it all along. The man walked in, grabbed a chair, and sat down. Show me, he challenged. His name was Rear Admiral James Corbin. and he had not flown 14 hours from Bahrain to settle a small argument in a back room. His journey was triggered when Darren Wyatt used 2 special words on a secure channel that was supposed to be inactive. For 11 months, James Corbin had waited for someone to say them. He took a seat at the head of the table and listened to Zara Cole without interruption. That single gesture spoke volumes to everyone present. Senior officers always cut in. That is what they do. They demand details, redirect, or point out errors. Corbin remained silent. He watched her explain the new plan, his face giving nothing away. When she finished, a quiet settled over them. Corbin studied the satellite image for a long moment. He looked at Wyatt. "When did she get this report?" 72 hours ago, sir. Holloway's team had it first. Wyatt's expression was unreadable. The plan was submitted 6 days ago. Holloway's top intelligence officer signed off on it. An officer who previously worked for Meridian Analytics, Zara interjected. Corbin's head snapped toward her. "Say that again." Captain Derek Sims, Holloway's intel lead, spent 11 years at Meridian Analytics before his commission. He is the one who approved this whole operation. The same plan with bad intel on page 47 and a secret building in the photos. A deep silence enveloped Corbin. "Where did you get the details on Sims's work history?" "It is in his official biography on the base network, sir. Hardly anyone reads past the first paragraph." Webb almost gasped. Garrett fixed his gaze on the table. Corbin put his hands down flat on the surface. He looked like someone who had been trying to force a locked door for a year, and it had just opened. "Lieutenant Cole, are you implying a link between the intel company, the approving officer, and this plan?" "I am just stating the facts from the official record, sir." "It is your duty to draw conclusions, sir." That was the ideal answer, and all the experienced soldiers understood why. She was not speculating or accusing anyone. She just gave him the information and left the decision to him. Corbin and Wyatt exchanged a brief, meaningful glance. "What is Holloway's current location?" Corbin asked. "He is in his office, sir. He placed Lieutenant Cole on leave 2 hours ago. Does he know you are here?" "No, sir." Corbin stood. "Good. We will maintain that advantage." He faced Zara. "You said there was another way in." "Yes, sir. Show me." She went back to the map. She moved with characteristic efficiency, without any extra motion or theatrics. She explained a southern approach via a service road and an alternate escape near the east fence. She proposed a revised schedule to move the team through the danger zone before the morning market got busy. She went over the evidence for the secret building, the new vents, the telltale shadows, and the report's omissions. Corbin shot 3 sharp questions at her. His questions made it clear he was actively looking for weaknesses in her strategy, not just listening. She answered all 3 of his questions without hesitation. He nodded once. "How many personnel do you need?" Her answer came instantly. 22 soldiers and 4 canine units. Why 4 dog teams? "If that secret building has hostiles and explosives, I want 4 dogs searching, not 2. Remy's team has the top detection rate. He has to take the lead." From the back, Flores straightened his posture. Corbin looked at Wyatt. "Can you assemble a team in 36 hours?" "I can have one in 24, sir." "Do it." He made a phone call that lasted less than 60 seconds. When it was over, Operation Clean Sweep had a new commander, and Brett Holloway had no idea. In a single moment, the entire mission changed. But the next event surprised everyone. Captain Derek Sims walked into the room. He carried himself with the assurance of a person who believes he is always welcome. He did not knock and failed to notice the tense atmosphere, expecting to be greeted. He was 3 paces in when he finally saw the Admiral. He stopped so suddenly his assistant nearly ran into him. The aide assessed the room instantly and wisely backed out. Sims, on the other hand, was trapped. Captain Sims was trapped. "Admiral Corbin," he said, his voice mostly steady with just a trace of tension. "I was not aware you were on base, sir." "That was by design, Captain." Corbin's eyes swept the room, taking in the map and photos. His gaze lingered for a fraction of a second on the red circle around the hidden building. It was a tiny pause that most would miss, but Zara saw it, Garrett saw it, and Wyatt was watching Sims's every move. "I need you to leave the room, Captain," Corbin said. "We will contact you." "Sir, this briefing concerns an active operation, and I am the assigned intelligence lead. I have clearance for all clean sweep planning." "You had clearance," Corbin corrected. "Captain, I am asking you to leave one more time." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Sims did not move. In that short silence, you could almost see him calculating the odds, what he knew, what they knew, and his own risks. Then he turned and walked out. The door clicked shut. Webb exhaled slowly. "He is going to be on the phone the second he is clear." "I am counting on it," Corbin answered, his own phone already in his hand. He was calling base security with a simple command. Captain Sims was about to find out his calls were not connecting today. None of his calls went through. While Sims frantically dialed his contacts, the secure lines on base were silently being monitored. Zara was unaware of any of this. She just saw a closed door, a decisive Admiral Corbin, and a mission changing right in front of her. She refocused on her task, looking at the map again. The first signal that something else was wrong came from Flores. He was with his dog, Remy, who had been quietly resting for the last hour, as he always did. 4 minutes after Sims left, Remy suddenly stood up, his attention locked on the door. The dog's ears flickered, and his calm posture snapped into a state of high alert. It was a subtle change, but Diego Flores felt it as strongly as his own heartbeat. "Remy," Flores whispered. The dog did not respond, his eyes fixed on the entrance. Flores moved quietly to Wyatt's side. "Senior Chief." Wyatt leaned in. "Remy is indicating something at the door." Wyatt looked from the dog to the doorway. "He detects stress hormones, high cortisol. That is his expertise." He turned to the guard. "Check the hallway, right now, and do it silently." The guard was gone and back within 18 seconds. "Sims is at the East Communications desk down the hall." Wyatt addressed Corbin. "Sir," Corbin glanced from Remy to Flores. "Your dog got a hit on him?" "Yes, sir. A clear stress reaction. Elevated cortisol, with signs of active deceit. Sir, he is trained to NCIS standards. He overlooks normal nerves. He only signals on the physiological tells of someone who is hiding something." An intense silence filled the room. Corbin's voice was flat. "Actively hiding something." "That is correct, sir," Garrett confirmed from his chair. The dog knew. His words were a statement, not a theory. It was the kind of statement that redefines a situation, and everyone present felt the change. Corbin straightened and turned to Zara. "Your proposal. How soon can you present it to the team?" 2 hours, she answered. "You have 90 minutes. She gave a quick nod and immediately started working. Wyatt was already on his radio, calling in the team leaders. Webb was on his feet before Wyatt even finished the transmission. In less than 10 seconds, the room transformed from watchful stillness to focused urgency. This is how top-tier teams function when a decision is made and every second counts. In the midst of it all, Corbin paused beside Zara for only 3 seconds. He did not praise her for the discovery or congratulate her on her work. He just asked for a full written report detailing every document she had flagged after finding that single footnote. She looked him in the eye and said, "Yes, sir." He then said, "This is not for your personnel file. This is for a formal investigation." In that instant, she knew this situation was much bigger than Operation Clean Sweep. It involved something corrupt that had been spreading for 14 months through 3 failed operations and 1 contractor with a very profitable agreement. This whole deception was uncovered by a footnote on page 47, which a lone 22-year-old lieutenant had bothered to read. About 40 minutes into her presentation, while Zara was outlining her strategy, the base intercom came to life. It was Commander Holloway. "All personnel, this is Commander Holloway. I am resuming command of Operation Clean Sweep, effective immediately. Halt all planning. Lieutenant Cole will report to my office, under escort, right now. A dead silence fell over the room. No one even breathed. Zara paused for just 2 seconds, looking at the speaker. She then faced the map again and continued her briefing without breaking stride. Webb looked at Garrett, who was examining his hands. Flores watched Remy. The dog sat perfectly still, his calm, amber eyes focused on Zara. In the corner, Corbin spoke softly into his phone, his face unreadable. 6 minutes later, when Holloway's voice came back over the intercom, Corbin had ended his call. He walked to the center of the room and waited for Zara to complete her sentence. She looked at him. He said, "Commander Holloway has been relieved of duty, pending a formal NCIS investigation. That inquiry will cover the Meridian Analytics contract, this briefing, and 3 prior missions." He paused to let the words sink in. "Lieutenant Cole, this operation is now yours. Proceed." The room was quiet. Webb looked at the ceiling. Garrett put his hands flat on the table and let out a long breath. Flores saw Remy tilt his head, as if he understood the command change. Zara held Corbin's gaze for 3 seconds. Then she spoke to the team. "We move in 32 hours. This is the plan." The next 32 hours proved to be the most challenging of Zara Cole's life. She did not sleep for a single minute. There was far too much to be done. She was in charge of a mission born from a lie, rebuilding it in real time with a team that had chosen her side over their commanding officer just yesterday. That choice put them all at risk. She knew it, and she was going to prove their faith in her was justified. She went over the plan 3 times. During the 3rd review, which was for her own peace of mind, she found a critical flaw in the extraction strategy. It would have left 2 vehicles completely exposed for a full 60 seconds. She corrected the mistake quietly. A real leader fixes problems without fanfare. But Wyatt saw it. He always did. He found her later and said, "That was a smart fix at the Eastern Junction." She met his eyes. Yes, that 1 minute could have been fatal. He gave a simple nod, and the subject was closed. 18 hours later, Webb came to her. She was at the main table, going over images of the target compound for the 11th time. He took the seat across from her. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead. When you found that note on page 47, did you know what was happening?" She kept her eyes on the photograph. "I knew the strategy was wrong. That is not what I am asking." She finally looked up at him. He was 26, a veteran with 2 deployments and a sharp, questioning mind she respected. "No," she admitted. "I did not think it was deliberate sabotage. I assumed it was incompetence. Someone had done sloppy work and no one else had checked it. So what told you it was something more? When Holloway wouldn't even review the evidence. I gave him the folder with everything, and he dismissed it in 4 seconds without ever opening it." She paused. An officer who makes a genuine mistake looks very different from one who is covering his tracks. Holloway had the second look. Webb was quiet for a moment. "And you saw that?" "I have been reading people my whole life," she said. "It was a survival tactic I learned long before I ever wore this uniform." He did not ask for more. He nodded slightly, then stood and went back to his station. She turned her focus back to the screen, their conversation finished. At the 26-hour point, Corbin arrived. His purposeful walk told her he had new intel, not a simple check-in, and new intelligence this late was almost never a positive development. He sat. Over the last 8 hours, NCIS made contact with 3 former Meridian Analytics employees. 2 of them are cooperating. She said nothing, waiting. "The northern route was not a mistake," he continued. "They used traffic data from a Saturday on purpose to fake the civilian count. The whole report was fabricated to make that route look like the smart choice for a Tuesday." Corbin explained the horrific objective. The convoy was supposed to drive into a market filled with 1,400 civilians. The mission would have been a disaster. In the resulting chaos, the real target, the building with the hostages, would have been completely ignored. He let that information hang in the air, The enemy protecting those 14 hostages is expecting us to come from the north. They are totally unaware that we know about the other building. The truth struck her hard. The enemy had their entire plan. Someone on their own team had sold them out. The tension in the room thickened as the full extent of the betrayal became sickeningly clear, much worse than she had ever imagined. She whispered the name Sims. Corbin gave a grim nod. Sims, and at least 2 others from the contractor. NCIS has them in custody. His eyes were sharp. The enemy has our old strategy, but they know nothing about your new one. That is your advantage, Lieutenant. It is the only one you've got. Use it. She looked straight back at him. We will, sir. He started to leave, but then stopped. He turned to her with one last, stunning piece of news. For your information, Holloway has filed a formal complaint against you. The accusations were insubordination, unprofessional conduct, and planning an unauthorized mission. She heard the words, her expression remaining perfectly calm. And what about the complaint? She asked. It is on record, he confirmed, tucked away in his file, which is now about 200 pages thick. They held each other's gaze for a brief, tense moment. Just complete the mission, Lieutenant. That is the only thing that matters. And with that final word, he was gone. She allowed herself 30 seconds to process everything, then returned her focus to the task at hand. The mission was scheduled to begin at 4:30 in the morning. A deep silence fell over the base, the kind of quiet that happens when every person knows the stakes are high. 22 operators prepared for deployment, supported by 4 K9 units. Leading the way were Remy and Diego Flores, a silent silhouette against the first light of dawn. Zara gathered her team, but she offered no grand speech about valor. That was for leaders who doubted their plans. Instead, she gave them 4 facts. 14 souls are trapped in that building, and they have probably given up hope. Our enemy believes they know our every move. They are wrong. Let's move. Nothing else was necessary. On the transport, Webb turned to Garrett. That was it. 4 sentences. Garrett secured his gear. That was all she needed. The convoy rolled out, taking the southern route she had mapped out 30 hours earlier. Her plan guaranteed it. No northern assault, no crowded marketplace. And 1,400 civilians would not be caught in the crossfire. They moved like shadows, eating up ground and getting 4 minutes ahead of the clock. As they neared the 800-meter mark, Remy made a low sound. It was not a bark, but a quiet, specific signal that meant people were nearby. Flores' closed fist went up. The team instantly dropped to a knee as one. Zara moved up beside him. What's he got? Flores focused on his partner, who was tasting the air. He's picking up multiple signatures inside. He's trying to sort them out. A second later, Flores understood. They are under extreme stress, high cortisol. They are not fighters. And just like that, Zara knew. The dog had found the hostages. She glanced from the target building back to her squad and gave 2 silent hand commands. The operators shifted into their entry positions like a well-oiled machine. Remy and Flores moved to the front right position. Zara was counting on the dog's incredible sense of smell to identify who was on the other side of each door. The story of the next 22 minutes would eventually be told in cold, official reports, stripped of all human emotion. But one single, defining moment, an image that would be seared into the memory of everyone present, was only seconds away. It came at the 14-minute mark. Flores and Remy came to a halt near a rear door. The dog assumed a firm, seated posture. That specific, drilled signal meant one thing, and one thing only. Living individuals were on the other side. Flores looked to Zara for the signal. She studied the doorframe for a beat, then gave a decisive nod. The door swung open to reveal all 14 hostages. The sound that rose from that room was something no simulation could prepare them for. It was the collective gasp of people who believed their lives were over. It was the sound of hope returning with the force of a tidal wave. Zara was the first one to step over the threshold. Her eyes swept the room, counting 14 civilians, 12 men and 2 women. Some stood, but most were on the floor. Her tactical assessment took less than 3 seconds. 4 were in bad shape. 10 could move on their own, but every last one of them was alive. She focused on the closest man, maybe 50 years old, who was shaking violently. He just stared, unable to believe she was real. She knelt to be at his eye level. "We are with the United States Navy," she said, her voice steady. "You are safe now. We're here to take you home." He grabbed her arm. His touch was weak, but his eyes were sharp. "We heard them talking," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Last night. They said the Americans were coming for the market. They said they were ready." She looked straight into his eyes. "They were waiting at the wrong place." The man stared at her as the meaning of her words began to sink in. "You changed the plan?" "Yes," she replied simply. "We did." He then noticed Remy moving carefully through the group, checking on the hostages one by one. A woman reached out for the dog. Remy stopped and let her press her face into his fur as she let out a quiet, relieved sob. Zara stood up and caught Flores's eye. He was watching his partner bring comfort to the woman. "He just always knows what they need," he said quietly. The entire extraction of every hostage took only 11 minutes. All 14 of the hostages were evacuated from the location without a single issue. The 4 with the most severe injuries received immediate care before being moved to the medical station. The team suffered 0 casualties, among either the operators or the canine partners. The entire mission was over in 33 minutes. As the last hostage was secured for transport, Wyatt approached her. He watched the vehicles prepare to depart before he spoke. 33 minutes. 34 until we are clear, she corrected him. Holloway's plan would have taken them 40 minutes just to find an empty building. She did not have to say more. The success of the mission spoke for itself. Just then, her radio crackled to life. It was Corbin on the other end. His voice had its usual authority, but she noticed an unfamiliar hint of respect in his tone. "Cole, I need a status update." "All 14 hostages have been secured," she answered. "Extraction is complete. We are returning to base now." A short silence followed on the line. "Outstanding work, Lieutenant." She clicked her radio twice in acknowledgement and climbed into the vehicle. Webb sat across from her. He looked at her face for a moment, but remained silent. He knew that Zara processed things in her own way. The best support he could offer was his quiet presence, so he simply sat, offering silent support. Next to him, Garrett tilted his head back, shut his eyes, and allowed a small smile. It was the simple expression of a soldier glad that a dangerous job was done right. In the back, Remy lay down next to Flores. The dog understood his part was over and was completely at ease. Zara stared out at the passing landscape. Her thoughts drifted to page 47 of the mission dossier. She pictured a single footnote buried beneath a complex chart of numbers. Whoever wrote that note was betting no one would ever read that deeply at 5:30 in the morning. She remembered the hostage's hand on her arm, his words confirming the enemy was waiting at the market. She played out the other scenario, the one where she had stayed silent during the briefing. It would have been easier to gently question the Northern strategy and then let it go. Challenging your superiors is not exactly encouraged in the service. The entire structure is built on the idea that rank equals correctness. The more senior the officer, the more their judgment is treated as gospel. A 22-year-old lieutenant is taught to follow orders, not to question a superior's flawed plan. But every choice in her life had prepared her for that one moment of courage. 14 people were safe and headed home because of one tiny detail, one brave decision, and 29 operators who chose to trust the truth over the chain of command. Zara gave herself 30 seconds to feel the victory. Then she flipped open her notebook and started her report for Corbin, who would want every last detail. As she wrote, Webb nodded at Garrett. Garrett looked at Zara, scribbling in the dim vehicle light just 30 minutes after pulling off an impossible rescue. He closed his eyes, completely content. "Yeah," he murmured to himself. "That was the mission." The formal debrief started at 7:30 in the morning and continued well into the afternoon. Zara stood at the head of the conference table, answering every single question with the same sharp focus she had shown for the last 72 hours. She fielded questions from Corbin's staff, from 2 freshly arrived Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents, and from a lawyer assigned to draft the official record. She handled it all by herself, with no attorney and no script. Her only tools were her field notebook and a flawless recall of every event since that first meeting where she raised her hand. For 2 solid hours, Wyatt watched from the back of the room, a silent figure nobody addressed. The person running the meeting was Agent Patricia Hale, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She knew the Meridian case file inside and out before she ever walked into this room. When she turned to Zara, her questions were like surgical instruments. "Lieutenant Cole, at the time you first raised your concerns, did you have any idea that Captain Sims was connected to Meridian?" Zara's reply was immediate. "No, ma'am." "And were you aware of the 3 prior mission failures?" "Not the specifics. Senior Chief Wyatt alluded to them later, but that was it." "So why did you read all the way to page 47? Zara held her gaze without blinking. "I read the entire file." Hale paused for a long second. "Most officers do not do that." "I'm aware of that," Zara said. "They were counting on it." Hale jotted down a quick note, processing the weight of that statement. She looked back up. The footnote. "Tell me precisely what you saw and the conclusion you drew from it." And so Zara laid it all out. The supply delivery on a weekend, the market traffic on a weekday, and the lie about 400 to 600 detainees when the real number was 1,400. Zara presented the facts just as she had in the briefing, without any emotion or guesswork. Agent Hale listened intently, not interrupting once. When Zara finished, Hale stated, "You built an entirely new operation based on that one discrepancy." Zara corrected her gently. The footnote pointed to the problem. "All the intelligence we needed was already there. The building layouts, the light reports, the airflow diagrams. I didn't create anything new. I just read the report." Meridian Analytics had supplied that file, knowing the truth was buried where no one was expected to look. It was a gamble they had taken, and they had just lost, to model. That is an important distinction. Agent Hale set down her pen. She watched Zara for a long time, her expression neutral. "Lieutenant, this investigation has been active for 11 months. You are the one who uncovered what they were hiding." A thick silence hung between them. Zara remained silent. It was not a compliment, but a statement of reality. She treated it as such. Later that day, she was formally charged with insubordination, professional misconduct, and executing an unsanctioned operation. The board came to a decision within 40 minutes. Zara was in the lounge, staring at a bare wall. It was her first coffee in 36 hours. Wyatt walked over, holding a file. "Legal has dismissed all 3 charges," he said simply. She looked at the folder. "How?" "First, you were following a superior's direct order, one he gave very publicly. Second, Admiral Corbin retroactively approved your planning session. And finally, no one can argue with the mission's complete and total success." He let the news sink in. 14 for 14, Cole. 0 losses and all in 33 minutes. She gripped her mug. "What about Holloway?" "He has been relieved of his duties pending the investigation. They also have Sims in custody. Investigators are now looking into the whole Meridian Corporation. They suspect the problem is much bigger than just this one base." He paused briefly. "They think this has happened before. That information was sold to our enemies." As the terrible truth settled, she remembered what Wyatt said about 3 other failed missions. The missions he was never specific about. She thought about the soldiers from those teams who never came home. "How many?" she breathed, her voice a faint whisper. It was not really a question, but a dreadful realization. Wyatt understood exactly what she meant. "They are still working on the final numbers," he answered gently. She put her mug down, her body suddenly tense. All I saw was a footnote, she said softly. You saw a footnote, Wyatt agreed. And you refused to let it go. And then 29 operators stood behind you. He leaned forward. Cole, that footnote was only a spark. It meant nothing until you fanned it into a flame. She looked into his eyes. He was 20 years older than her, with a lifetime of experience she could barely comprehend. He had the look of a mentor passing on a legacy. This went beyond military rank. It was about something far more important. You are the reason any of this happened, he said. Every last part of it. She did not argue. She just raised her mug for a sip, absorbing the gravity of the moment. An hour later, Webb, Garrett, and Flores came in. Flores's dog, Remy, was right at his heels. The dog walked directly to Zara, sat, and leaned his weight against her leg. It was an undeniable gesture of confidence. She glanced down at the animal. She put a hand on his fur. He does not do that with just anyone, Flores mentioned. I know, she answered. How did you figure it out? She looked at Remy again. He knew something was wrong in that hallway before any of us. I figured if he was watching me so closely, I should be watching him. Flores gazed at his canine partner with a new level of wonder, amazed by his instinct even after 18 months together. Garrett sat down. The investigators will need more from us. I assumed they would, she replied. This is not going to be over quickly. I know. Are you ready for it? She thought about the question for a moment. This was not a quick fight, but a long, exhausting process of giving testimony. No, she admitted frankly, but I am going to do it anyway. A smile finally appeared on Webb's face, changing his whole expression. Yeah, he said. I thought you might say that. 3 weeks later, Zara was at a formal hearing in Bahrain. Rear Admiral Corbin headed a panel of 5 officers she did not know. They reviewed a file that summarized 72 hours of her existence into cold, hard text. Corbin read the report for the room. He went over the timeline, the bad intelligence, the hidden note, the hallway confrontation, the 29 operators who had her back, the new plan, and the mission's success. His voice was perfectly calm. When he finished, he set the documents on the table. Lieutenant Zara Cole, he started. This panel has reviewed every detail of Operation Clean Sweep, from your personal actions to its final outcome. He paused for a moment. All charges against you are immediately dismissed and will be expunged from your file. Your command decisions have been officially validated. He let the silence hang for another second. The panel's decision is unanimous. He made direct eye contact. Effective immediately, you are promoted to lieutenant commander. The room was almost completely still. This was an official proceeding, not a party. There was no clapping or celebrating. There was only Corbin, 5 other officers, a recorder, and Wyatt, who was mysteriously there again. Zara stood straight, absorbing it all. Lieutenant Commander. She thought back to the briefing room at 5:30 that morning. She saw her own hand shooting up when no one else would dare. She recalled the hallway, the voice over the radio, and the commander who was so certain he would destroy her career. She pictured the 29 faces that believed in her. She saw the dog who knew something was wrong first, and she remembered page 47. Corbin stood up, and the other panel members did the same. He came over to her and offered his hand. During the handshake, he said softly, "You never needed our approval, Lieutenant Commander, but this ruling creates a new standard for others to follow." She met his gaze. "And this is for the ones who did not come back from the last 3 missions," she said. He nodded with complete understanding. "Yes," he replied, "for them." That was the win that counted. It was not about the promotion or the official handshake. It was for the fallen, for the soldiers who were lost because of deception hidden in a detail nobody else bothered to read. She spoke for them now, and she always would. It was a duty she would carry for the rest of her life. Wyatt was in the hallway, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He looked perfectly calm, as if he had not just sat through a 2-hour hearing. As she came out, he said, "Lieutenant Commander Cole." She looked straight at him. "Senior Chief Wyatt." He uncrossed his arms and put out his hand. She took it. He held on for just a moment longer than he had to. Always read the fine print. She met his gaze without hesitation. I never stopped. He gave a single, firm nod. Nothing more needed to be said. At Camp Lemonnier, inside the kennel where this whole thing started, Remy was lying on his bed. That evening, his handler, Diego Flores, visited him and told him the entire story. Flores was well aware that dogs do not get promotions or military ranks. He told him the news regardless. After 18 months with a partner who could detect lies and follow 14 people by scent, he was confident Remy understood the parts that mattered. The dog had earned the right to know. Remy raised his head and looked directly at Flores. Then he put his head back down on his paws. Flores sat on his own bed, just watching his partner. "You knew the entire time, did not you, boy?" he murmured. And that is the tale of how a 22-year-old lieutenant found her power in an institution that did everything to silence her. She had no high rank, and the system was built against her. She did not have the perfect confidence that leaders are supposed to project. All she had was one report, a single small footnote, and the determination to not give up when every force pushed her to quit. 29 people stood by her, proving that the truth has strength even when no one wants to hear it. 14 civilians returned home to their families because one person chose to pay attention, and a German shepherd named Remy sensed that something was wrong long before any human on that base knew to even ask a question. This story shows that loyalty is not about waiting for an order. True courage is not given by a title. And the truth, even if it is hidden on page 47 in a note that was meant to be ignored, will always find its way to the person who is brave enough to look for it. If you were moved by this story, and if it served as a reminder of your own inner strength, please subscribe to our channel to see what we share next. We would also appreciate it if you would comment below with the name of your city followed by the word Amen, so we can track how far this story has reached and know it resonated with you, because some stories are so important that they need to be heard by everyone.